Hi, I'm Jim Young. I'm a historian by profession and a labor activist by intention. So I've been asked to share with you a few thoughts about labor history in America and about our own union, too.
American history is labor history. Unions have fought on the side of working people for a long time. So let me scan briefly over almost 350 years of struggle. It's the story of how people have organized since the earliest American settlement.
American workers have always resisted being pushed around. They don't like it. And they haven't from the beginning. In 1676, slaves and indentured servants and small farmers in Virginia raised the Bacon's Rebellion against their domination by the wealthy tobacco plantation owners.
Later, crowds rallied against the Stamp Act and the Tea Tax, the real Tea Party, and city workers took inspiration from Thomas Paine's radical ideas. Democracy was the main one. New York tailors even conducted a strike in 1768 against a wage cut. Some such organizations disappeared after the crisis. Others continued. But for a while, a larger cause commanded most people's attention, the American Revolution. But in the wake of the Revolution, we see the Philadelphia shoemakers bargaining with their employers over wage rates, hours of work, and the way in which work was to be done. And those are still chief points of bargaining between workers' groups and employers. Despite employers' opposition, unions multiplied. They usually covered only a specific craft or skill set. Shoemaker, carpet weaver, carpenter in one town or city. But soon they expanded their vision in at least 5 ways. 1. Each union spread to more towns and cities, eventually combining in national and international union organizations like today's SEIU, the United Steelworkers Union, the American Federation of Teachers. 2. More and more crafts organized unions of their own. New crafts, machinist, railway engineers arose. 3. Unions in each town and city formed coalition organizations, central labor councils of all the unions in the area. 4. Ultimately, nationwide coalitions were of unions formed, the first being the National Labor Union, NLU. 5. Some trade unionists even supported a workingmen's party for political purposes.
Politics was never far removed from the labor movement, but just how to engage in politics remained controversial then, and it is still controversial today.
Abraham Lincoln might have felt glad that he lived in a land where free workers could strike and that labor is superior to capital. But employers vehemently disagreed, and employers became increasingly powerful in the decades after Lincoln's death. Civil War raged on in many places. In 1901, J.P. Morgan created the first billion-dollar corporation, United States Steel. Other mergers followed. Meanwhile, workers tried to better their organization in the face of rising corporate power. The Knights of Labor arose in 1869 and enjoyed some success against railroad tycoons, but faltered in the 1880s. The American Federation of Labor, AFL, rose in the 1880s, but organized almost only the skilled trades, cigar makers to sheet metal workers. They did show survival skills and still exist as part of the AFL-CIO umbrella organization of American labor. Other workers sought to change the system itself. Some followed railway union leader Eugene Debs into the Socialist Party and the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW. But World War I and its aftermath crippled the Socialists and the IWW, and the AFL prospered as it supported President Woodrow Wilson and the U.S. intervention in the war. Union membership increased from hundreds of thousands to 4 million during and immediately after the war. But the war was followed by a steep recession and by a ferocious attack upon corporate America.
And this was the situation into which our union was born. In 1921, the AFL issued a charter to the new union. The Building, Services, Employees International Union to organize janitors, maintenance mechanics, elevator operators, and people of that nature. It was not a promising time to start a union.
Corporate managers launched the so-called American Plan, which was basically an all-out war against real unions by setting up employee representation committees dominated by the company. They also used company spies, private security agents, public relations campaigns, and every other means of influencing and intimidating workers to stay away from unions. Of course, they also fired anyone suspected of supporting a union, and beatings by company thugs, even killings, were part of the culture.
Predictably, the financiers and the corporate CEOs overreached once again, and they created the Great Depression of 1929-1939. A sea change followed in attitudes towards politics and towards unions.
The service employees had survived, and when the union-friendly New Deal administration of President Franklin D. Roosevelt produced the National Labor Relations Act in 1935, and another war created a labor shortage, union organizing surged once more, despite events like the Memorial Day massacre of steelworkers in East Chicago and the Battle of Hershey in America's Chocolate Town. By 1945, the BSEIU totaled 115,000 members in the U.S. and Canada. Changes in the concept of service workers also aided BSEIU. After the war, the union organized greenhouse workers and sports arena vendors. In the 1950s, the game changed even further, with public employees added to the service concept. The union dropped building from its name and began organizing this new group. Enter Pennsylvania.
Laws passed in the late 1940s made life harder for workers and for union leaders. Those who wanted to form unions had a very difficult time, and a very difficult time to stay in them and to operate them. Public employees had it harder than anyone. They, in many cases, were forbidden to join a union at all. They were forbidden almost everywhere to strike. They didn't know which way to turn in many cases. But in Pennsylvania, a couple of labor-friendly governors, George Leader and Richard Lawrence, gave them some room. They allowed people to form unions, and they gave people permission to meet and discuss with state managers, to look at and to discuss, not negotiate, but to discuss seriously issues between labor and management.
From this beginning, SEIU established 19 locals in Pennsylvania by 1967. The most important of which was Local 406, led by future Local 668 leaders Claude Saraceno and Lillian Nichols in the Scranton area. Elsewhere in the state, events developed differently. In Philadelphia, a pro-union group arose among welfare caseworkers, and still others joined the Reform Organization for Communications and Change, ROC, which established the right and well-being of their clients in addition to traditional labor management issues. ROC President Karen Williams made overtures to SEIU, to the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, and to the National Association of Government Employees, NAGE. Meanwhile, other activities occurred as activists circulated leaflets and protested against poor working conditions and client relations.
The Caseworkers Study Group sprung up in Allegheny County and similar groups elsewhere, all outside the law. rebellion was in the air.
But the law caught up with realities eventually. A bill, Act 195, was crafted with the intention of putting an end to these unstable relations with public employees, including teachers, who were the most frequent illegal strikers, and hospital workers and others. The bill allowed public employee unions to bargain collectively and to exercise a limited right to strike. Many conservatives and employers opposed the idea, of course, but because of an unprecedented degree of cooperation among Pennsylvania's union, a formidable lobbying effort was launched under Mike Johnson, Executive Vice President of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO, and Act 195 was passed. Union organizing in Pennsylvania surged ahead, and workers responded.
Actually, the situation was pretty chaotic, but a lot of workers were fed up with being treated like household servants, and they were ready to go. A lot of old-time labor leaders weren't quite sure what to make of the situation either.
Organizer Marty Moran believed that AFSCME President Jerry Worf was happy to cede the welfare workers to SEIU rather than contest the matter. Worf, Moran says, had had his fill of social workers when organizing New York a couple of years earlier. Too idealistic, too demanding for union democracy. These Pennsylvania workers sounded the same. The following election between SEIU and NAGE was not even close. SEIU-PSSU carried Philadelphia by 7-1 and the entire state by 3-1. Two entities, then Local 668 PSSU and Local 675, the Employment Security Workers, were certified in January 1972 to jointly bargain a common contract with the Commonwealth, but would remain two separate locals until their merger in the mid-1980s.
It wasn't easy to transform a bunch of activists and organizers into a cohesive leadership group that could prepare to create a union and to get ready for negotiations with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Regional and vocational and generational differences played themselves out. Younger members found it peculiar that Claude Saraceno and Frank Catanese referred to brother and sister in the traditional trade union style. Philadelphians and small-towners viewed each other with some misgiving. But a constitution that decentralized power through a system of regional chapters was hammered out, and dues were set. By a vote of only 418 to 396, at 1% of income, not including overtime pay. Peg Beers of Indiana County won the presidency, and Greg O'Byrne, a chief organizer of the union, was hired as executive director, and a negotiating committee was chosen.
The easiest thing to discuss about labor management negotiations are the money and the benefits, because they can be quantified. You can count them.
And in 1972, Pennsylvania public employees had a lot of catching up to do, with 5 of the 6 surrounding states. Only West Virginians fared worse in pay. And benefits? No hospital medical insurance, no dental plan, no help with prescriptions, no vision insurance. But money matters weren't the only consideration, by far. We had like 64 pages of demands, Sandy Siegel recalled later. It was the most unbelievable document you've ever seen. Adequate staff training figured large in the union proposals, as did an improved welfare delivery system, and more. They didn't win many such demands, but salaries and benefits increased enough to change people's lives, and they also gained the principle of just cause concerning disciplinary actions, as well as meet and discuss language to cover non-contractual differences with management. In later negotiations and a strike in the 1970s, PSSU-SEIU members won even greater gains and benefits under Governors Milton Shapp and Dick Thornburg. Seeing this and operating out of their own needs, local unit workers began to organize and vote also to join SEIU. Dauphin County, Bucks, Erie, Delaware, and Lancaster counties came into the fold and fought for the kind of contracts that state workers had won, and they too gained monetarily and professionally.
Emboldened by President Reagan's firing of the air traffic controllers, Thornburg began making takeaway demands at the bargaining table, and meet and discuss sessions became acrimonious.
With that, public labor management relations in Pennsylvania took a sharp turn for the worse, relieved only somewhat by labor's winning the Fair Share Law under labor-friendly Governor Bob Casey, whose administration also helped meet and discuss sessions to become useful again. Meanwhile, SEIU had to take the Commonwealth to court over the assault by state police upon our Philadelphia picket line during the 1988 strike, a case that we won.
The roles of public employee unions may seem less dramatic and romantic than those of earlier times, but these times are no less dramatic and dangerous in their own way. Powerful forces who brought economic ruin to many in our country a few years ago aim to slash the public sector and to privatize services where they can't eliminate them altogether. They've cut public jobs, public workers' pay and benefits, and they seek to reduce and to privatize public pension funds, even as they seek to increase their own wealth and influence. These forces paint public employees as underworked, overpaid parasites on the public payroll, ignoring the horrific damage that they have done to this country and its economy. They divert people's anger towards us and towards immigrants and others who have played no role in undermining the economy. In short, they lie, often. Apparently, they hope to verify the old propagandist saying that if you tell a lie loud enough and repeat it often enough, people will accept it as truth. But we're an organized cadre of activists, and we fight back. We know what side we're on, and we know why. We stand in the way of a total corporate domination of ourselves and of the rest of American society.